we're about to dive into the incredible story of a boy who started out quiet, kind of solitary, but would grow up to completely rewrite our understanding of the universe. I mean, this is the guy who cracked the code on motion, gravity, and even light. This is the story of Isaac Newton. So let's kick things off with a question that's really at the core of this whole thing. What if a simple, everyday moment, like an apple falling from a tree, could literally change the world? It sounds like something out of a storybook, right? But believe it or not, it's true. One man's curiosity about something so simple, well, it sparked a revolution in science. You know, every great story has a beginning. And Newton's, well, it doesn't start with some big display of genius. It actually starts with a really fragile childhood. So to really get who the man was, we've got to go back and meet the boy. I mean, right from the very start, Newton was up against it. He was born on Christmas Day in 1642, but he was so premature and so frail, nobody was even sure he'd survive. And get this, his father had died 3 months before he was even born. Then, when he was just 3 years old, his mother remarried and left him to be raised by his grandmother. You can just imagine the deep sense of abandonment that must have created. So what happens to a kid who's left alone like that? Well, for Isaac, that loneliness, it kind of became his own personal laboratory. With not a lot of other kids to hang out with, his focus just turned completely inward. He started observing, thinking, and building these incredibly detailed models. We're talking windmills, water clocks, sundials. And these weren't just toys. For him, they were a way to figure out how the world worked, piece by piece. That isolation, it ended up fueling this powerful, relentless curiosity. And that would become his secret weapon. Okay, so let's fast forward to his school years. Now, you'd probably think a genius like him would be top of the class from day one, right? Nope, not Newton. It actually took a very specific challenge to light that competitive fire in him. Yeah, it's kind of shocking, but at first, Isaac Newton was just an average student. His teachers actually thought he was lazy, not paying attention. But the truth was, his mind was just somewhere else entirely, way more interested in his own drawings and inventions than whatever the lesson was about. It's a great reminder, isn't it? Potential isn't always obvious. So what was the turning point? You're not going to believe this. It was a fight with a school bully. And after he actually won the physical fight, Newton had this epiphany. He realized the real victory wasn't about fists. It was about brains. So he made a decision right then and there. He was going to beat this kid in every way, starting by becoming the #1 student in the school. He literally turned that anger into pure academic fuel. And honestly, this moment, this transformation, it's really where the Newton we know begins to take shape. By the way, if you're finding this story interesting, definitely subscribe to the channel. We do a lot more of these deep dives into the people and ideas that shaped our world, and there's a lot more coming your way. All right, so after totally crushing it at school, Newton heads off to the prestigious Cambridge University. He's finally getting into the swing of his studies, and then bam, the world around him just grinds to a halt. So at 18, Newton gets into Trinity College. But right away, he realizes the official curriculum is, well, it's super outdated. They're still teaching stuff from the ancient philosopher Aristotle. Newton wasn't having it. So he basically created his own curriculum, just devouring books from modern thinkers like Descartes and Kepler. He kept this private notebook where he just filled pages and pages with questions, calculations, and the very first sparks of his world-changing ideas. And then in 1665, disaster strikes. The Great Plague sweeps across England, and Cambridge University has to shut down completely. So Newton is forced to go back home, back to the exact same kind of isolation he knew as a kid. And this wasn't for a few weeks. We're talking 2 full years. Now, you'd think this would be a huge setback, right? But it turned into his greatest opportunity. That forced time alone, it became the single most creative, most explosive intellectual period of his entire life. Seriously, historians have a name for it, his annus mirabilis. That's Latin for year of wonders. Because in that quiet, uninterrupted time, totally free from boring university lectures, he basically, single-handedly, built the foundations of modern science. So what did he actually do during this incredible timeout? Well, with 0 distractions, nothing but his own thoughts, and a lot of time on his hands, Newton's mind was finally free to go after the biggest questions in the universe. And this, of course, brings us to that famous story about the apple. Look, the important part isn't that an apple fell from a tree. That happens all the time. The real magic, the genius, is in the question Newton asked himself. He wondered, why did it fall straight down? Why always toward the center of the Earth? Why didn't it fall sideways or, I don't know, up? It's such a simple, almost childlike question, but the implications were absolutely massive. And that one simple question led him to this incredible aha moment. He realized that the same invisible force that pulls an apple to the ground must be the exact same force reaching all the way out into space, grabbing the moon and keeping it in orbit around the Earth. This was the birth of the theory of universal gravitation. It was a totally radical idea at the time, that the rules of physics here on Earth were the same rules that ran the entire cosmos. But he wasn't done, not even close. Next, he came up with his 3 laws of motion. The first one is basically inertia. Think of it this way. A soccer ball is just going to sit there until you kick it. Simple. The second law, the harder you kick that ball, the faster it's going to accelerate. Makes sense. And the third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when you kick the ball, your foot actually feels the ball pushing back on it. Just those 3 simple rules became the foundation for, well, pretty much all of classical mechanics. They explain everything from how planets move to how we build a bridge.
I mean, seriously, as if redefining gravity and motion wasn't enough for one 2-year vacation, Newton then turned his amazing curiosity to light itself. And of course, he started with another one of his simple but totally profound questions.
So he's in a dark room, and he lets a single beam of sunlight pass through a glass prism. And boom, out comes this beautiful rainbow of colors. We've all seen that. But here's the genius move. He then took a second prism and used it to capture that rainbow and bend it all back together into one single beam of white light. That was the proof. White light isn't a single pure thing. It's actually a mix of all the colors of the rainbow combined. And that discovery just shattered what scientists had believed for centuries. Okay, so once the plague finally dies down, Newton heads back to Cambridge. And you have to imagine him walking back in with these notebooks just filled with universe-altering discoveries. The next part of his story is all about getting that knowledge out into the world and cementing his place in history. It took a few years, but eventually his good friend, the astronomer Edmund Halley, the guy the comet is named after, convinced him to publish his work. So Newton gathered everything he had on motion and gravity and put it into this one masterpiece of a book, the Principia Mathematica. It came out in 1687, and it basically laid out the mathematical rulebook for the universe. Now, it was not an easy read. It was dense, it was complicated, but it presented this complete logical system for understanding how everything worked, and it just left the entire scientific world completely floored. The impact was just huge. Newton basically became a scientific superstar. He was made Warden of the Royal Mint, he became the president of the super prestigious Royal Society, and then, in 1705, the Queen herself knighted him. Think about that. The lonely, quiet boy that everyone overlooked was now Sir Isaac Newton, one of the most respected people on the planet. So, when you boil it all down, what's Newton's real legacy? It's so much more than just a few chapters in a physics textbook. His work completely rewired how we see reality itself. And it's not just history, it's still shaping the world that you and I live in every single day. Seriously, Newton's laws are the bedrock of our modern world. They are the absolute foundation of physics and engineering. Without his work, forget about designing skyscrapers or building safe cars or exploring space. Every single time we launch a satellite into orbit or send a rover to Mars, we are literally using the math and the principles that he figured out all by himself centuries ago. So what are the big lessons we can pull from his amazing life? I think there are a few. 1, always stay curious. Don't be afraid to ask those simple why questions. 2, learn to turn loneliness into a strength. Sometimes the best ideas come when you've got no distractions. 3, use challenges as rocket fuel to push yourself to be better. 4, dare to think differently. Just because everyone believes something doesn't make it true. And finally, number 5, make the most of your time. Even a forced break like the one he had can turn into your most powerful moment. And that really brings us to one last thought. If Newton's story proves anything, it's that world-changing ideas can come from anyone, from anywhere, and they often start with just a simple little question. So let me ask you this. What if the next huge discovery is waiting inside your mind right now? Maybe the next Newton is you. All it takes is a little curiosity and the courage to ask why. Thanks so much for watching.